The second unit that we're doing of Midrash is about formation and acceptance. And that is, we're talking about the formation of Agadah literature and its historical background, the attitude of Tannaitic and Talmudic scholars to Agadah, and then public sermons. So in the reading material that we had, there was several scholars speak from different perspective. That's in general what is the more or less the accepted framework of how Midrash came into being. One aspect of it is, as we saw yesterday, that within the rabbinical or Jewish genre, we go back and forth from the more legal code to something which is more descriptive and emotional, and we have narrative, storyline that people like. The same thing happened with the with Midrash versus Halakha. When people exhausted the field of Halakha and they already went through the Tanakh, through the Torah, and were able to interpret each and every verse exactly what is the legal definition, and then put it into the Mishnayot. Other people were looking into, okay, I want to understand better the narrative of the text. And the same thing happened also with the listeners. Not everybody was willing to listen to a dry lecture on legalities like, the hooves or the horn, or even if it's like what is the exact time for the Shema. You say, okay, I know what I have to do. How much can you dwell on it? But stories, interestingly enough, people could hear the same stories over and over and over again. And especially back then, that the stories were new stories. So that was something exciting to look forward to. So this is one reason, one element for the development of Midrash, which is just it's a natural process that happens within the development of Jewish literature. We go from the Tanakh to legal interpretation to expansion of the biblical narrative in order to just get engaged in this kind of literature. But there was another element, and that is the element of Greek influence. Because we see the flourishing of Midrash really coincides with the Greek invasion to Israel, which was in 323 BCE. Alexander the Great took over the Middle East, came to Israel, brought with him Hellenism, Greek culture. And he had this policy of conquering not with the sword. I mean, of course, whatever necessary wars had to be waged were waged, but then he recommended that his officers would settle down wherever they are, get married with the local women, and practice the local religions, and make sort of a synthesis between their religion and the local religion. So it was this kind of cultural assault was very widespread, and deliberately they did not create an elite society that was separate from the people. So people were exposed to it. So for a while, people were able to hold back. Like I mentioned yesterday, when it deals with philosophy or theology, they were able to hold back. But one aspect that was really enticing in the Greek culture was that it was more descriptive or more entertaining. For example, anyone had to read Beowulf, and right. So now imagine that you have the option of either the teacher says you could read the book, or you could watch the movie. I don't know if the movie is good or not, but no matter what, I think you'll say I'll watch the movie. How many times you heard that? You talk to someone about a book and they say, I didn't read the book, but I watched the movie. Right? It's very bad if you're a rabbi. Did you read that? Did you ever read the Ten Commandments? No, but I watched the movie. Right? Or the Passover.
As my son would immediately response would be, "Is there a movie?"
Is there a movie? Right? Why even bother reading the book? Right? Even if it's 5 words, they'd make it now into.
Is it on Netflix?
Right. So that was the attitude at a certain point in Israel. Because people say, okay, what do I do? Do I go to shul? Or do I go to the theater to watch the new tragedy or comedy? What's more interesting? Okay, tradition pulls you to shul. You go to shul. What do you do in shul? There were no public sermons at the time. You went there, you had the tefillah, and you had the Torah reading. problem was that most people did not understand Hebrew. So what do? The rabbi said, we'll translate to Aramaic for you. So one line in Hebrew, one line in Aramaic.
Oh my God, it takes forever.
Oh, but it gets better. Because after a while, people said, wait, so are we giving equal status to Hebrew and Aramaic? Impossible. So what are you going to do? We're going to read the Hebrew twice and the Aramaic once, so everybody will know that the Hebrew is more important. So in order to make the Torah reading more entertaining, right, we've tripled the length of that Torah reading and read each verse twice in Hebrew, which is not understood by all, and once in Aramaic. So you hear the known language every 3 sentences. Like someone is saying, la, 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 and Hashem spoke to Moshe. This is how, so this...
And that was more entertaining?
No, of course not. Of course not. I'm just, right, exactly. I'm just trying to illustrate like how, even today, you know, as rabbis, cantors, you know how difficult it is to get people's attention. So it was very difficult at the time. And the rabbis started borrowing techniques from the Greeks. So one of the techniques was delivering a sermon where people are told the story or the storyline of the parasha in a more understandable way, and then starting to embellish the story. A recommended article that I didn't give you, but I'll sum it up for you, is called, it's a chapter from Eric Newman's book on biblical criticism. It's called Odysseus' Scar. In that book, Newman speaks about the difference between the biblical narrative and the Greek narrative, in this case Homer. So in Odysseus' Scar is one scene from the I think it's from the Odyssey, where Odysseus comes back home after he was absent for so many years, and he comes back home, but he comes in, nobody knows that it's him, right? And he comes as a traveler, because his wife is being she has all these suitors who try to marry her. So he comes as a traveler, and he goes into the and the maid makes the bathtub for him, and she helps him because as a servant she washes him, and she sees the scar on his leg, and she knows it's Odysseus, right? And then Homer goes into 3 chapters describing the scar and how Odysseus acquired it. It was in a hunting expedition, and then he goes to describe who was it at the expedition, and what were they wearing, and what did they eat, and how did they kill the animals, and so on and so forth. Flashback, but with the wealth of details beyond imagination. Now, it says, on the other hand, look at the biblical narrative. That's like one of the more dramatic stories in the Torah, the binding of Isaac, right? Akedat Yitzhak. Can anything be more dramatic than a father leading his only son from one of his wives, right? But his dear son to be bound and slaughtered? Can it be more dramatic than that? Lord of the Rings, in the last movie, there's a scene like that where the king, right? It was very powerful in showing sort of like the Akedah, but it's a very dramatic story. And what does the Torah tell us of the journey that Abraham takes his son, and they travel for 3 days until they get to the spot? It says, "Vayelchu yahdav." They went together. That's it. Imagine like a modern author or a Greek author, Homer, what would have done with that, right? What were they talking about? What was going on in Abraham's mind? And as a matter of fact, in Midrashic literature, this is exactly what happened. And years later, hundreds or thousands of years later, the rabbis started filling in the gaps. What did Yitzhak tell Abraham? What did Satan? Because all of a sudden Satan is a new character there, and he's trying to block them from going to the Akedah. And maybe the most important protagonist that's missing from the story, Sarah. What was her role, right? Where is she? So all these things that it's not that the biblical story is missing. As I think that's the beauty and the power of the biblical narrative, that it allows us to infuse the story with our interpretation. That's why we could go back every year and find new meanings. But at that point, people needed more than that, and the rabbis provided it for them. Meaning that when you look at the Midrashic interpretation and the narrative, not necessarily everything that's there is true. It's an interpretation, or even just fantasy. Not to say that it doesn't take anything from the greatness of the story that the rabbis are providing, but it says take it with with limited guarantee. It's not what the Torah necessarily meant. You could rewrite it or reread it later. That was the original intention of the rabbis who delivered those sermons, but not necessarily it stayed like that forever. So to recap, so the first reason for the development of Midrash is just a natural evolution of literature, going back and forth between the genres of the fiction and non-fiction, and also after perusing one style of interpretation, you move to the next one. Second is Greek influence. Third is the need to, and that's more. Sorry, this is after the destruction or from before the destruction, the last 100 years. Is the need for a spiritual message that will uplift the morale of the people, because people look at the Bible, and the Bible sends certain messages, and they don't feel that those messages are fulfilled. They don't see redemption, they don't see hope, and they don't see direction. And the rabbi said, "Okay, we're going to use the biblical verses and invest them with new meaning in order to deliver a message to the people." So it was a result of the destruction or the persecutions that the rabbis had to use these, very similar to what happens the post-Holocaust literature, that people had to deal with the theological questions that they faced after the Holocaust. Like, where was God? Where was man? How is this possible? How is this possible in context of our literature? So this is something similar that is happening back then. So obviously when this happens, not everybody's happy. Some people love change, some people embrace change, and some people could get very frustrated with it, because this is not the way we do it. We teach Torah differently. We don't like these kind of stories. And
So who's the we?
It's the establishment. It's funny. It's funny that because sometimes a person moves from one camp to another, the way it convenes him. So it's one. He will, for example, be a master of Agadah, but he will say, "I don't like that people do that. Teach Agadah." Because even when you say this is the way we do it, or we always taught Torah like that, but the new method is fine, but only the way I do it. We see that also. I mean, it exists also in halakha today. You see one rabbi who says, no one is allowed to disagree with the previous generation, except for me, because I have the know-how and I have the tools to do that. And no one is allowed to argue with me, one of the later generations. So there's limited license to how to do that. But let's look at the text. So here are a couple of examples of what the rabbis themselves said about the formation of Midrash. So here we read from Shir HaShirim Rabbah. Anyone wants to read that? The first, on page 9.
In Hebrew or in English?
In Hebrew?
Oh, I can try.
Okay.
Tani, okay. עד שלא יחלה אדם אוכל מה שמוצא
כיוון
כיוון שחלה מבקש לאכול כל מיני תענוגים.
So let's stop here. What does it say here? When one is healthy, will eat whatever is available, but when he's ill, he seeks delicacy. So what are the delicacies in the context of what we just spoke now?
I would have thought it would be the opposite.
That what the legal part is the delicacy?
Delicacies would be
No, just the shot of it. Like when I'm.
Oh, it's not this our kind of sickness. Their idea of medicine was a little different. If that's what you mean.
You mean like wronged?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was
Yes,
a little different.
definitely.
It was inaccurate. That's what you're saying.
No, certain things they got right,
Okay.
but the categories was when they got it right, it was pretty good, like natural medicine, and all that. When they got it bad, it was horrible. Life expectancy was lower, for sure.
When she was very good, but when she was bad, she was.
Life expectancy was, sometimes in the 40s, 50s, pretty bad. Hygiene, I mean, the time of Talmud was not so bad. It was bad in worse in medieval times. But when they say this, I don't know if they mean real sickness, but rather, more in terms of strength and weakness. That like eating, they felt when you're young and strong, you could eat whole grain, but when you're old, your digestive system needs white flour or something like that, So, but that's the idea. But the essence is really that they look at the legal literature as something which is hard to digest, and the easier food, like the sweets, is the Midrash. Or in other words, it's just more fun, right?
So this is metaphoric.
It's metaphorical for the kid who says, "I'm full, I have no room. We have dessert. Oh, I can have dessert," right? So that's exactly it, and that's why Rabbi Yitzhak says, "L'sha'avar hayta haTorah klal, והיו מבקשים לשמוע דבר משנה ודבר תלמוד. ועכשיו, שאין התורה כלל, היו מבקשים לשמוע דבר מקרא ודבר אגדה." So he said, in the past, Torah was general property. I hope that's the meaning. That's how I understand that. הייתה Torah klal, so available for everyone. And people would want to hear Mishnah and Talmud. But now, most people have no access to it. And
They don't know the language anymore?
So, I don't know if it's about the language. He's complaining about the level of scholarship of the people, which in itself is questionable. I mean, even that should be taken with a grain of salt, because people always complain about how in the older generation everything was better, everybody was smarter, the food was tastier, and for sure, children respected their parents more and never complained. So in the same vein, it says, in the past everybody studied Mishnah and Talmud. Not necessarily so, but maybe he's correct when he's looking at the rabbinical academies, because the rabbis themselves went into this new field, and it was interesting. But it's interesting that he also puts in two opposite categories: the Mishnah and the Talmud on one hand, and the Mikra and the Agadah on the other. The Bible is, you would have thought that it would be an integral part of studying the law, but it's not. We see here a glimpse of what will happen later in Europe, especially in Ashkenaz, but later also, the Sephardim caught also the same attitude of not really looking into Tanakh. Tanakh is not that important, or it's too important. I mean, either it's a way of justifying not dealing with Tanakh too much.
So what's Mikra then?
Mikra is the Bible, from the word kara, to read. That's the
Right, but you said that oh my God, I can't speak today. That the Tanakh wasn't important.
Well, no. So
now
he says, now people want to learn Tanakh. Why do they want to learn Tanakh? It's easier. So with the Tanakh, you have two approaches. Either you just read it superficially, and there are nice stories in the Tanakh, and we do have nice stories. They're really, we could say, ageless stories. Just picked up it was the bookstore yesterday that I looked at the Action Comic Bible, which is very nice. I wanted to buy it, but it has the New Testament. But it's about 3/4 of the book is about the Old Testament, and about a quarter about the New Testament. We have better stories. Sorry, right? There is no the story of
Not
Tanakh.
a single story.
But they're referring mostly probably to the narrative.
Yeah, they are referring to the narrative, right? So what happened to the non-narrative, to the legal part of the Torah? It was just integrated into the Mishnah and the Talmud, so you knew the verse through the text, but not necessarily you knew the whole verse. And actually, it was shown that there are cases in the Mishnah and the Talmud that the rabbis don't know the biblical text accurately. It was like sort of pushed aside, and partially because it was too important, because it was held with that reverence. It's sacred. So I don't even to open the scroll. It's. Can you see how that could happen? That because something is so holy, you rationalize that you don't want to go near it. It happened later on also in medieval Europe. For about 200 years, people did not wear tefillin. The Orthodox people, most people considered, whatever, we didn't have the word, but observant people did not wear tefillin for about 200 years. Why? We're not holy enough to wear tefillin. Right? So it happens.
It also, what I'm hearing also is that you have this new class of scholar, right? The rabbis. So there would also necessarily be, it's almost, there's a political influence here too, that they're wanting to maintain kind of control over the law and then be able to be the sole source of the practical halakha, whereas the Tanakh and the stories and the Agadah, well, there isn't, that that belongs to everybody. It doesn't have the same power associated with it in terms of control over the community.
Yeah, I could see how they say that. First of all, it's true that the rabbis were trying to maintain control, and they're still trying to. It still is a problem, and you always see that there are revolutions that are related to communication in the Jewish world as in the general world. So the printing press paved the way for example, the arrival of the Shulchan Aruch that took over. One of the reasons for the Shulchan Aruch getting this, prominence in halakha, and now the internet is changing in many ways the way people connect to the rabbis, because you don't have a local rabbi anymore. You have Rabbi Google, as they call it.
Rabbi Google. Is there such a thing?
People say that, right? But I mean that you could learn online. You could also check. When I was in elementary school, and even in high school, and would ask the rabbi something, and he wouldn't know. He would have been able to say, it's written in the holy books. It's written or he would have been able to say something, and if we challenge, no, that's how it is. Today you can't do that. You would say the wrong date or the wrong. Someone will. No, it's not that, right? So you have to be more careful. So it takes away power. Remember, we spoke yesterday about the Gaonim, the Gaonic literature. They maintained control for about 500 years. They said, if you want to learn Talmud, you have to come to Babylonia. We're not. They were reluctant of ordaining people who will go to other countries. Around the 9th, 10th century, the communities of Spain broke free, and then the communities in Ashkenaz, and that paved the way for the center of Babylonia going down, and the centers in Spain and Ashkenaz going up. So it is always a power struggle, but I think it's an interesting idea that you see like the reverse. What he's saying, he's complaining about one thing, but really he says, when we were teaching, like as the teachers, when we were teaching Mishnah and Talmud, we were the ones who had the knowledge and people had to listen to us. But now that everybody's dealing with Mikra and Agadah, everybody can be a scholar, right? That's okay. So next, Rabbi Levi continues this line of thought. I'll read the Hebrew, and it says, "Leshe'avar hayta pruta metzuya, v'haya adam mit'aveh לשמוע דבר משנה והלכה ותלמוד. ועכשיו שאין הפרוטה מצויה, וביותר שהן חולים מן השעבוד, אין מבקשים לשמוע אלא דברי ברכות ונחמות."
Rabbi Levi said, in the past people had money, and one would desire to hear Mishnah, Halacha, and Talmud. But now that people are not rich, and especially since they are afflicted by subjugation, they only want to hear blessings and comforting words.
Okay, so you understand that.
Well, you just mentioned it too.
Yes.
I need to deliver reason 3.
Yeah, reason 3, right. But the way the rabbi describes it,
Sounds like he's complaining.
is complaining, right? He's complaining, and in the way he says the people are more well-to-do. More often they could dedicate time to sit and learn in depth, but the people who work all day, they could only come in for a couple of minutes and they don't want to hear rebuke. It's not only the content, not only the subject in terms of what are the texts that we're studying, also the content. They want us to comfort them. How would you describe the way Torah is being taught today in different circles? Is it a Torah of joy or a Torah of rebuke or somewhere in between? Whatever circles you're familiar with.
I don't know, the ones that I am in, it's all about comforting. I mean,
And it's good. You like it. Do you wish sometimes it would be the opposite?
I don't like to be rebuked, really, under any circumstances.
I don't know anyone who does.
But I don't know. I go to Ikar sometimes, and she sort of finds, Rabbi Browse finds a balance between both comfort and rebuke, and I think so does Rabbi Finley in the synagogue. But yeah, I don't know. Most of the places I go, it's just like comfort.
Okay.
I think that we live generally in a world that kind of wants things easy and spoon-fed, and we like to feel good about what we're doing. And so, personally, I kind of feel sometimes like there is a kind of a Torah light in most religious, not even religious, but Jewish, identifiably Jewish institutions. That it's a good thing. We want to build community and engage people on a joyful level. But at the same time, I do think that there's some of the substance that's missing because it doesn't, like this, it doesn't feel as good.
Okay.
There's the responsibility that comes.
Oh,
with
okay. That's a key word, responsibility. I think that's a key word, responsibility.
It's a difficult concept in today's world.
Obligations.
Yeah.
So you're right. I agree with you. I agree with you also. In terms of that, we have to have a balance. But responsibility not necessarily comes with a negative rebuke. It's the Torah light would be the Torah that just come once in a while and I don't know, read this or hear this or visit or volunteer for something, but there are no real obligations. But when we speak about responsibility, it doesn't have to be only the responsibility of the ritual of whether it's davening, praying, saying blessings, but there's something greater than that maybe goes missing for some, which is the concept of tikkun olam and our responsibility to society and to each other. There is, in certain circles, there is this mentality of always finding fault and telling people they are sinners, and this is a problem because it usually backfires. You're able to keep people at bay for a while, but out of fear. But the way they live Torah is not a happy, joyous one, and since it's not this kind of Torah, they don't really internalize it. So at a certain point, they will sort of shed it completely, or they will rationalize, not because they're not happy, because they will say, okay, if I'm a sinner, for example, for not waiting 6 hours or 3 hours after eating meat, right? So I might as well perform a sin that I really enjoy, right? Why be called a sinner for something so trivial? I mean, and I know this from experience with people that I spoke to. So, but it's interesting because this complaint of Rabbi Levi is a complaint that you could hear today from some rabbis. Oh, the generation, they don't care. And I think in a way it's really a something that comes in cycles. And actually historians and sociologists and today futurists also, I think, identified a cycle of 4 generations. That the generations of the founders who work hard and do everything, and the next generation, not just in Jewish history, in world history, the next generation who take their parents' achievements to a higher level. The next generation rests on the laurels and they sort of become passive. And the next generation, the children, are the revolutionaries, the hippies or the peaceniks, but it keeps.
But then it starts again.
It starts again. It starts again. So when you see this, it's like, wait, in Jewish tradition, we keep saying each generation is worse than the previous. Like the first generation they were angels, we were humans, or if they were humans, we are donkeys. They say that. So we're like low self-esteem. But really, it's you look at this argument, and it comes back every couple of generations.
If they were so good, why did we need the flood? So I just had a question, or maybe
Yeah.
I find that the congregant community that I interact with is normally very receptive to concepts of tikkun olam, but not of like tikkun nefesh, not of the whole rally around fixing some cause.
Yes.
But when you try to help people and work on themselves, they don't want to hear about that.
Yes.
And they walk away from that. So
Yeah.
It seems to be a dichotomy.
I agree, because it's easier. People go always for what is, when we talk about responsibility, people go for the easier task. So when you talk about, let's call it the ultra-Orthodox circles, so if I want to be pious, so I could buy a more expensive lulav, I could buy a bigger talit, and I could shake more vigorously when I pray. Right, they're all external, but by the same token, I don't have to change my behavior, my internal behavior. When you go to other circles, they will say, let's work on tikkun olam, save the forest or the Sudan or whatever it is, which are all important causes, right? But in the process, maybe part of our soul is left behind. We don't need to attend that. It was a hilarious scene in one of the episodes that I watched of Portlandia, where a couple comes to a restaurant, and there's a dog tied there, and they start yelling at people of this cruelty, or how can you do this to your pet, and all that, and eventually they go and release the dog, and the poor dog doesn't know where to go, and it's like sort of lost. But after they had their meal, they go around the corner, and they untie their child who was harnessed to the. So.
Sounds like The Simpsons.
Yeah, it's exactly that. No, like we care for pets, we care for our children. It's of course exaggerated. I hope it doesn't happen, but you see that, and for me, I've witnessed this in a synagogue, for example, on Kippur, where one of the cantors goes up and he recites one of the prayers and he cries, and wow, everybody's emotional. Why the man is so engaged, right? And then he goes down and he makes an insulting remark to one of his one of the congregants about wearing the same suit every day. Really? So you take your whole tefillah and they say in Israel, wrap it with a dollar and throw it to the sea. So anyway, we're talking about this balance. So brachot v'nehamot you need to hear, but you also need to hear about responsibility. But in general, this whole thing is a rant. It's a complaint about the state of the union, the state of the generation. They don't want to learn Mishnah and Talmud. All the rabbis who speak here think that the most important subject to study is Mishnah, Talmud, and Halakha, and that Mikra and Agadah are not that important. It's the common core argument: fiction, non-fiction. So that's one source. Let's look at the second one. The other one is in Aramaic.
What's also interesting about that from an authoritarian perspective.
Yes.
Right? Study what we control, not what
Yes.
comes from Hashem.
Yes. Right.
Would you say that right?
Yeah.
Huh?
That's what Caroline said. More or less, right?
Yeah. Well, to me, I don't know. What Rabbi Levy says is, I'm pissed off because I'm not getting paid. I mean, that's what
Okay.
it comes off as.
Okay.
Right?
To put it in a harsh way, no, I don't think that the rabbis got paid by there were no really paid positions in the rabbinate at the time.
Oh, during the rabbinic period, yeah.
Yes.
Later in the
The priests were the
later in
ones who
Middle
made all the
Ages,
money.
yeah.
Yeah, the priests were the ones who really
Even the high life.
Yes.
Especially the high priest.
And yeah, the high priest, exactly. Pun intended, I guess, but we'll get there. That's one of the units where we'll talk about that, about the rabbis versus priests.
It's sort of like, I don't know, part of the pull of the argument is how much you respect the laity and how much you respect, like, where your allegiance lies. Like, is it with the elite or is it with the laity? You know? And I don't know, to me it's kind of sad because Rabbi Levi doesn't really seem to understand that when people are suffering, they really do need to be uplifted.
So, I don't know, we could see it this way, or maybe we could say this, Rabbi does identify with the people. I think that in general, you would always see two types of leaders: those who care for themselves and those who care for the people. In all societies, across all institutions, government, whatever it is, and those who care for the people, in many cases, are being pushed aside because it's sort of intrinsic to their attitude to not seek power. They're not power thirsty, so it's hard for them to step over other people and ascend to the throne, sort of. So it's from this point of view, it's interesting observation. Okay, so let's look at this entry from the Talmud Bavli in Sota, and it says the following: Rabbi Avu veRabbi Hiya beRabbi Abba iklau lahu atra. Rabbi Avu darash be'agadita, Rabbi Hiya bar Abba darash bishma'ata. שבקוה כולי עלמא לרבי חייא בר אבא ואזול לגבי דרבי אבהו חלש דעתי אמר לי אמשול לך משל למה הדבר דומה לשני בני אדם אחד מוכר אבנים טובות ואחד מוכר מיני סדקית על מי קופצים לא על זה שמוכר מיני סדקית. So what is the story about? We have two rabbis, Rabbi Avu and Rabbi Hiya bar Abba, and they came to a place as public speakers. They're giving a lecture, right? They post on their Facebook page, tweet, whatever.
Is that in itself kind of Greek? Did they get this concept of just showing up?
Yes, it's already right. Rabbi Avu he's in the 3rd or 4th century, and Rabbi Avu has actually he lived in Caesarea, which is a Greek town named after a Roman emperor Caesar, but it was a heavy Greek population. He was also very friendly with one of the early fathers of the church, who lived in Caesarea. Was it Hippo or an Augustine? One of them anyway. I forgot his name. He was familiar with Greek literature, and he was later on in this same paragraph of the Talmud. It says that he was close with the Beit Kesar, with the royal palace. So he's more integrated in the Greek culture, and they come to this place where Rabbi Avu expounded Agadah. He gives a lecture on Agadah, or a sermon. Rabbi Hiya bar Abba darash bishma'ata. Rabbi Hiya bar Abba taught halacha, and it's called shma'ata from the word shamar, which is oral tradition, because there was this strong emphasis of saying that all legal literature is oral tradition that goes all the way back to Matan Torah. Now all the people left Rabbi Hiya bar Abba and went to hear Rabbi Avu. Doesn't necessarily mean that they left the actual hall to go there, but they had a choice where to go, and they chose to go to Rabbi Avu. Halash da'ateh, so he was upset. Rabbi Hiya bar Abba was saddened that people didn't come to hear his lecture, which is a natural thing, right? If you offer courses, or let's say you're leading two parallel minyanim in your synagogue, and one of them is attended by 10 people, and the other one by 50, so someone will be upset. So Rabbi Avu says, let me give you a parable or analogy to what is the matter like. To two men, one of whom was selling precious stones, and the other various kind of small ware. what do they call it? Custom jewelry?
Costume.
Costume jewelry, okay. To whom will the people hurry? Is it not to the seller of various kinds of small ware? So what is it saying here?
I just, one word comes to mind. Shiny.
Like glitz, you mean?
It's just sort of a joke, but it's like people go, it's like even a little kid, like Moses,
Yeah.
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 These Midrash about
Right.
Moses, or just,
Yeah, taking the coal, right?
Why do women like the diamond rings? Shiny.
Yes.
Yeah, but this is the opposite.
So what are they taking?
I wasn't quite sure, did he...
We don't know what Minesit Kid is, if it means smallware or fake jewelry.
I wasn't quite sure also, was he saying that
Yeah.
people really go to it, or was he saying
Yeah.
that they don't go to that, when they go to the pressers?
Well, if you don't have a lot of money, you're not going to be buying precious gems.
Right.
Well, I think it's, okay, so that halakha is a much more substantial value than Agadah.
Mhm.
It's one comparison that's good. But even with that said, people tend to prefer something else that's perhaps a little more approachable, accessible.
Because it's accessible, because they can afford it. So again, it's sort of a disparaging view of Agadah. But he's talking about himself. He says, they came to me not because I have better stuff to offer, because they cannot understand, or they're not at the level of hearing what you have to say. They're incapable of yes.
It's just so, pejorative to stories, which I think are really important. I mean, stories are sort of like the life of humanity.
True, but not everybody sees it that
Not
way.
to the early rabbis.
Yeah.
I know some modern rabbis who don't understand that. I know some modern rabbis who would give a dry academic lecture, right? And when you tell them, people cannot understand that, it's their problem, right? They have to.
There's nowhere for your soul to go.
I used to get multiple drashas each week, and one of them was very, very well written by a very scholarly rabbi. I couldn't read it because it was too dense and too academic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll pause this. This concept, right? It's and again, it's something that we still have today. That what is the content? What do you give people? So we have the extremes. I've heard, and in some cases even participated in classes where it was very dry and academic, even though the content was brilliant. And just at the end of the class, people would say, "Do you want to daven minha?" I would say, "No. First, you have to wash hands because we were all sleeping through the class." And on the other hand, I heard classes where the whole thing was one long one story after another, and it's okay. So, but what is the message? I want something. There's a balance that you could strike between, telling the story, or finding the narrative, even in the legal parts of the Torah, and then delivering a message. This is the combination. But in this case, it is pejorative because Rabbi Avu is trying to save grace for Rabbi Haim Ovadia, and he says, don't get offended. It's not that they don't like you; they're just incapable of learning what you have to suggest. You know what the truth is? You don't have the end of the story here. What do you think happened after this? After he sort of apologized and he said, "It's not about you; it's about me." Right? What did the other rabbi? How did he react? Did he accept it? Did he not accept it?
I was going to say he started telling her that. I don't know.
Oh, maybe that was the next
I would think he wouldn't accept it.
He wouldn't. He didn't. At least at that night, the Talmud says, "I told you that Rabbi Avu was a friend of the emperor, and he actually stayed in the palace, and the other rabbi stayed in another place." So usually, the let's call him the halakha rabbi used to walk with Rabbi Avu to the palace out of respect for his royal connections. That night, Rabbi Avu walked him over to his place to appease him, and still he was not pleased, right? So, and maybe because really it's just a prism of something much bigger. There's a rift that is happening between the halakha rabbis and the Agadah rabbis. Eventually, what happened like Eric suggests, I think that that's really what happened. People realized I have to have some of this as well. You know, if people ask for this merchandise, I have to be able to offer it, even if they don't buy it, but at least know that I could do it. And really, most scholars went for that. They had some kind of a combination of halakha and agadah. And here we come to the next source, and this is the Talmud Yerushalmi. And we read the following: Rabbi Simlai, Atei Gabe Rabbi Yonatan. So Rabbi Simlai came to Rabbi Yonatan. Amar le Alfan Agada. Teach me Agada. Just a side comment. I have to get up and use the board. Alfan is Aramaic for teach me or teach us. It comes from the word Aleph, which is in modern Hebrew, le Aleph is to train. But also you have it in the word Ulpan, where you study Hebrew, and that it is related. You know, the Aleph, Aluf, is a chieftain because he's a more knowledgeable person. So, and Aluf or Aleph in Hebrew is also an ox, because ox is a symbol of power and prowess and possessions. And the early Aleph was written like this, which is a diagram for like a sort of a pictogram for ox. You see the head, like from the horns. Okay, so it's the Hebrew pictograms that became letters. So just interesting. He says, "Teach me Agadah," and you see he speaks Aramaic. I'm saying this because he inserts an Aramaic word into his words. It's half Hebrew, half Aramaic. Amarle, he told him, Masoret beyadai me'avotai. I have a tradition from my forefathers. Shelo lelamed Agadah. Not to teach Agadah. Lo lebavli velo lidromi. Not to a Babylonian or a Southerner. Shehen gasei ruach u'me'utei Torah. Because they are rude and devoid of Torah. Ve'at nehar de'ai ve'dar badarom. And you suffer from both, because you come from Nehar De'ah, which is a city in Babylonia, and you live in the south of Israel. Ouch, right? Harsh. So
he's not very concerned with the people, with his congregants.
Yes, there are some disputes in the Talmud. There, some harsh words.
Yeah.
Actually, there were cases of violence against Babylonians who came to Israel. People who were punched at the time. I'm talking about 2,000 years ago. The people who came to Israel and people, oh, you're a Babylonian, and they would punch them in the face. There was a really deep animosity, which is interesting.
They were a Jew?
No, we're talking about Jews. No, not yeah.
When they say south, which south?
South of Israel. So in Israel at the time, you have the north, which is Tiberias, Tzipori, Shfaram, Usha. You could travel a lot in the Galilee and find all the remnants of the time from the time of the Tanites. There are some places in the center, not in Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim was off limits for Jews or Christians at that time. 3rd, 4th century. It was called Ilia Capitolina. It became a pagan city. And then in the south of Israel. So there were competing schools. It's Harvard and Oxford and Yale. It's you don't mix them. So this Rabbi Simlai comes to Rabbi Yonatan. He says, "Teach me Agadah," and he says, "I'm not teaching you. Why? You don't know enough Torah, and gasei ruach. I translate as rude, but the gas ruach could be also translated as not refined. Gas is crude. So Rabbi Yonatan says, and it's not clear. I mean, with this all what we're saying now is commentary. He says that you need a certain depth of understanding Torah and also a breadth of knowledge. So you need you need to learn more in order to teach Agadah. So, is it like a push for elitism, right? This genre of Agadah is spreading, and more people are engaged in it. So now the Rabbi say, okay, only if you're a true scholar, you could teach Agadah. So now, when Karen said about he doesn't believe in power to the people, but we'll see later on that there is a real concern here. That besides it's not just a power struggle, there's something deeper here, and it's a serious concern. I don't know if it was the concern of Rabbi Yonatan, but it is possible, and that is that Agadah is extremely flexible. Whereas when you go into the halakha, even though the rabbi said somewhere else that they were able to declare an impure things pure with 150 arguments, or to do the opposite, to declare something which is impure with 150 arguments. At the end of the day, when you would come and examine those arguments under the halachic magnifying glass, you would be able to say, okay, this works, this doesn't work. With Agadah, it's very hard to do that. How do you know which Agadah is valid and which is not? The rabbi saw the dangerous potential of Agadah that could be taken anywhere you want. So I'll give you one example. This is a modern example. Many years ago, it was probably 35 years ago, I was in high school. I was riding the bus in Jerusalem, and it was exactly the time that the Rabbi of Belz passed away, and there was, of course, a succession war. Like, who's going to be the heir? Especially Hasidic dynasties, when that happens, if the rabbi did not clearly specify which one of his sons is going to be the heir, so you have a war. And in Jerusalem of the time, where do you conduct the war from? It's still today even from the walls. That's the
Battleground.
Yeah, Facebook has the wall. This is the real wall. That people put posters still today, and they tried to put the posters a second before Shabbat, so nobody could cover them with another poster. I actually saw it was crazy. People driving the escape vehicle. I was at the traffic light. Someone just drives on the sidewalk. They get out of the car. They put all the posters. They drive away. So what's going on? To make sure that they are the last posters that will be there for the whole Shabbat. But this was written on the wall. It was the name of the Rabbi. I think it was Shalom Dov. I think it works out. Yeah. So this was the name of the Rabbi. And it was Shalom Dov equals Mashiach. So that was sort of like the proponent of that rabbi. He should be the leader because the numerical value of his name equals the numerical value or the word Mashiach. Right? The following day, because this is, reply, there was someone erased this and wrote equals Nahash, serpent, or Satan, right? So he doesn't like the rabbi. But if A equals B, right? And A equals C, then B equals C, right? So the Mashiach, the Redeemer, and the serpent are one and the same. So here's an example of no.
I like it.
Oh, okay, you like it. Okay, good. I'm just saying that this is a small example how you could go wrong with Agadah, because you could take the word and twist it any way you want. If you take, there are levels of interpretive tools. Do you take the word and break it apart? Do you look at the narrative? Do you look at at paragraphs? You compare this story to that story. Sometimes you try to identify unknown people. All these elements are sort of like unmapped territories. You could do whatever you want there, and that is the danger. And that's why he says you have to be refined. You have to really have a sense. You have to have the soul there in order, not only the knowledge, but also the sensibility and sensitivity to what is. The irony is that Rabbi Simlai eventually did turn out to become a scholar of Midrash, and he's the one actually who gave us the number 613 for the mitzvot. a number that left a lot of people perplexed with where did this number come from. If you put all the lists together, each one who tried to list the mitzvot, you come to about 750. Because each one came with 613, but each one has mitzvot that the other didn't count. So they're all arguing about that. Meanwhile, we don't even know that Rabbi Simlai had a tradition on that, or he just he made his own count and he says 613. Because that, by the way, is the opinion of Nachmanides. Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman says the 613 are not Torah le-Moshe Sinai. It's one rabbi who decided to count the mitzvot. This is the number that he arrived at, and it's Rabbi Simlai. Okay.
Can I ask one question?
Yes. Can ask many questions.
Was there any subsequent discussion of was there any, this could really be very racist and bigoted, to be putting that whole group of people into that category?
Oh, no, there wasn't.
There was never any other discussion.
Oh, no, there are other discussions that put the Babylonians down.
Right, but there was never a challenge to this.
No, he didn't.
Even within the Yerushalmi?
That's in the Yerushalmi.
This is from the Yerushalmi.
Yes. That's from the anti-Babylonian literature.
Even from the south of the country,
even
south.
within even their own south. Yes. The Talmud could be harsh at times.
Why Yerushalmi?
Yes. And as a matter of fact, the Mishnah in Yoma speaks about the people who would harass the high priest when he would, not the high priest, the priest who would take the scapegoat on Kippur, and they would say, hurry up, take our sins away to the desert. And they would pull his hair and push him. And so they had to build a bridge for him to go over the crowd directly to the desert. And who were those people who would pull his hair? They were the Babylonians. And then when they did, whatever, but wait. So when they discussed it, they said they were not really Babylonians. They were Jews from Egypt, from Alexandria. So why are you calling them Babylonians? Because we hate them. Meaning it became a pejorative title. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. But we see, that just like I said, that we have, whenever you have change, you have opposition. So of course, around changes, you will have a lot of harsh feelings and disputes, and they come to light here. Okay, another one from Talmud Yerushalmi. This is really in the sort of the classic Aramaic of the Talmud Yerushalmi, which is called the Western Aramaic, the Western dialect of Eretz Yisrael. Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, which also is a master of both Halacha and Agadah. Ana min yomoi la istakalit besifra da Agadeta. I have never looked at a book of Agadah. Elahad zeman istaklit, except for once. Afilu chen ana mitba'id belelia, and I still have nightmares.
So dramatic. These guys are so dramatic.
Makes you want to read it.
Interesting. He's a master of Agadah, so it's like a cliffhanger, so or a teaser.
Feet we were talking about yesterday, right? The one jar.
Now, Rabbi Hiya bar Ba, which is actually Bar Abba, the son of Abba, just the Aleph was not pronounced in the Israeli dialect. So Rabbi Hiya bar Abba, who's the same, remember the same colleague of Rabbi Avu, the one who was speaking about Halacha? Hama had Sefer da Agadah. He saw a book of Agadah. Amar, Ima kativ tavut, even if the content is good, tikata yada dichtavta. The hand which wrote is deserved to be chopped off. Dramatic, and Saudi Arabia, that's what they do to a thief. So why such drama, right? So you see, the opposition is very strong. But here we have, what is the difference between this this text, and which is the last text that we're going to look at in terms of the approach to Agadah of the early rabbis? What is there's one main difference, or one new added element in comparison to the previous sources? There's something here that we didn't have in the previous ones.
This seems to be a blanket statement of
Haggadah pad, whereas the previous one is, I thought, just limiting.
Right. So, the previous ones were not pleased with Haggadah, but they didn't say it's all bad. But here it seemed like to use in very, very definitive terms. You are not allowed to write it. You're not allowed to look at it. And if you write it, your hand ideally should be chopped off. So what is the added element? There's one added element in this story that doesn't exist in the previous ones.
Is it that there's now a book?
Yes, it's a book. Now it's written. So as long as you deliver an oral sermon, an oral tradition.
About it 5 minutes later.
Yes. Or it will be told differently. There will be different versions, and this, by the way, happens. There are fascinating studies of the different versions of the same story, not only in Midrash, in across the world. We're talking about especially folklore, how a story evolves and has different versions. Or, if you wish, not in folklore, in our personal narrative. If you know someone long enough and you heard the story from them more than once, you could write down all the differences between the first version, the second version, and between married couples. It happened again. I always tell my wife. Like she tells the story, says, "This is not how it happened." She says, "Shh, be quiet. Let me tell the story." So, but you weren't even there. It's my story.
It's her story now.
Yeah, but it's because it's not really about the details. It's about the message, and who am I telling it to? I'll tell it differently, and it's very, very, really interesting and intriguing to see that.
Because it's truth with a capital T instead of truth with a lowercase t. It's not about facts; it's about truth.
Right, and the relevancy of it too. But once you write it down, it becomes more solidified, more literally etched in stone. Now, if I go back a little bit, with the Mishnah, when we spoke about the editing of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi calls all the material that the different schools teach and he puts them together. But before he does that, the Talmud said that he had, or tradition says that he had major reservations. He was not sure if he should do that. And the reason he didn't want to do that, the Talmud says, is that they had this tradition, Devarim shebe'al peh, ata rashai le'omram bichtav. You are not allowed to write down oral traditions. And traditionally, this was interpreted as some kind of just a commandment. God gave it to you orally; you should keep it that way. Don't turn it into written material. But I think that what Rabbi Yehuda meant with this statement is that the Mishnah, up until his time, the halachic literature and the Mishnah, it was a dynamic process. It was flexible and it was changeable, and it adapted to changing times. And his fear was that the moment you write it down, it becomes rigid and it becomes codified. And once it's codified, it would also, the next step after codification will be sanctification. It will become sacred text.
That's what happened.
And that exactly is what happened. That the Mishnah became a sanctified text. And as such, the Talmud tries to figure out exactly why each letter is there and why each word is there. And the Talmud still had the scholars of the Talmud were still capable of saying sometimes, okay, this makes no sense, or there's a mistake here, or there was an original version and there was a second version, and Rabbi Yehuda just didn't want to disrupt the chain of of thought, the way people associate it, so he put both in place and stuff like that. They were able to say that, but after the Talmud, that's it. The Mishnah became sacred, and now the Talmud went through a process of codification. And after that happened, the commentators on the Talmud went through the same process. So as we have progress through this process of writing down the oral traditions, each generation sanctifies the literature of the previous generation. It makes it more and more difficult to deal with changing reality. And that was something that, if it is a problem when we deal with halakha, it becomes even a greater problem when you deal with Agadah because of its flexible nature. Because you could say that halakha, at least its majority, stems from the divine word. God knows what's good for you, and He gave us the code of behavior. But when it's Agadah, in many cases, it's a personal agenda, or a communal agenda, or a local problem, and maybe what's good for this generation is not good for that generation. But once you write it down, people take it as the word of God, and it's a problem. What?
Once you write it down, people take it as gospel.
It's gospel. It is. So, and that's why I think Rabbi Yosef ben Levi, who is himself a master of Agadah, says, I never looked at the book of Agadah, saying that he doesn't approve of writing this Agadah down. And with the one time that he did it, he had his nightmares. I don't know if he has nightmares because of the content, but more he says, I am afraid at night, like he's afraid for his life. Maybe I did something that I should not have done. Right? And in the same manner, Rabbi Rabbi says the hand of the person who wrote that book should be chopped off, meaning he should have never written that. He doesn't say that the content is not correct, but you don't write it down. These are some of the sources that we could look at when we ask what was the attitude of the early rabbis to Agadah. Yes. Okay. So let's take a quick break here, because we're going now into looking at public sermons. That will be the next couple of sources, and we see how the rabbis develop those drashot b'tzibur.